I'm 31 years old, and I instantly sensed something was wrong when I saw the look on her face. My mom, Margaret, was on the couch with Lisa's children, looking better than she had in ages. It was odd because she had claimed to be too weak to watch Mia, my daughter, even for one night. Yet she looked perfectly capable of handling my sister's 3 kids. I felt a sinking feeling. Everything just stopped. The kids' laughter stopped when they saw me standing there in the doorway. For a moment, my mother looked startled, then she composed herself, forcing a smile I knew so well. "Jake, what a pleasant surprise." She said that, bouncing my nephew on her knee. I didn't know what to say. The cash in my hand, the extra money I brought to help with the bills, felt heavy. I glanced back and forth between my mother, Lisa's children, and my dad, who seemed to sink further into his chair, not making eye contact. "You told me you couldn't watch Mia because of your health," I finally said, my voice strained. The room went completely silent. My mother paused, but Lisa, always ready with a justification, spoke up. "She has a lot on her mind," she stated. "We didn't want her to overdo it." My temper flared, that familiar tension building in the back of my eyes. I repeated her explanation back to her, keeping my voice calm. She was, in fact, babysitting at that very moment. My mother sighed, rubbing her forehead like I was causing her grief. I was well aware of the hypocrisy. She explained that this was different, that Lisa needed her help. Bringing up children all by yourself isn't easy. The ground vanished from under me. In that instant, the entirety of my life, spent always feeling second-rate, became clear. I confronted her directly, asking if Lisa, who'd never handled any financial responsibilities, the one mom always favored since childhood, needed her more than I did. An oppressive quiet descended. Dad fidgeted uncomfortably. Lisa's eyes darted upwards, and Mom just gave a dismissive headshake as if my concerns were absurd. "It wasn't like that," she firmly stated, although it absolutely was. My teeth ground together so hard it hurt. Everything suddenly started to fit together. Mom's so-called sickness wasn't about physical ailments. It was about having power. She didn't want to risk me stopping the flow of money, so she deceived me. She played me. She let me think she was too unwell to assist. All the while, without any shame, she was cashing my checks. And Lisa knew. She always had known. Something inside me broke. All the bottled-up anger, bitterness, and letdowns overflowed. I told them I finally understood it all. I was never truly a member of this family. Just the fallback, the security measure, the fool keeping everything running while they pursued their own lives. Mom dramatically inhaled. I stopped her before she could reply. It wasn't right. No, what was unfair was me covering their financial obligations for years while they considered me unimportant. I believed they truly required my assistance, when in fact they just didn't want to do anything for me. Mom was a deceiver. Lisa moved closer with that infuriating expression I despised. She said I was overly emotional, saying Mom had to be careful around me because I was so sensitive. I glared at her, my face like a statue. I told her she was ridiculous. She allowed Mom to treat her like she was still a teenager, and she loved it because it was less work than dealing with her own problems. They were perfect for one another. Without another word, I walked away. Mom called out to me. Lisa shouted something nasty. My dad didn't say anything. Like usual, I kept going. I couldn't stop myself. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel. My throat felt like it was on fire. The ride home was a hazy mix of lights and signs. When I finally got to my house, I knew what had to happen. Erin was in the kitchen when I got there, Mia already asleep upstairs. She understood with just a look at me. She wanted to know what happened, her tone gentle and worried. I recounted the whole story to her, the babysitting, the dishonesty. The absolute proof of what we'd both thought for so long. She didn't look shocked. Perhaps she'd always sensed it too. She asked me what I was going to do. I told her I was finished, completely done. I slept soundly that night, better than I had in ages. The following morning I cut off all the payments. The rent, the electricity, the car insurance, the food deliveries, every single thing. Then I sent one last text. "You're on your own from here on out. Best of luck." And I blocked their numbers. What came next was absolute mayhem. At first it was the missed calls. My phone exploded with notifications, almost like a festive light display, until I cut off their ability to contact me. After that came the emails. They were full of pleas, desperation, and attempts to make me feel bad. When those were ignored, they started trying Erin. She turned down every call, and the way she did it made me adore her even more. Eventually, Margaret went public with things. She posted a lengthy, emotional message on Facebook, lamenting how her unappreciative son had abandoned his ailing, vulnerable mother when she needed him most. She detailed all the sacrifices she claimed she made for me, only to be treated with such unkindness. But I didn't respond to that. Instead, I crafted a post of my own without any exaggeration, simply stating the facts as they were. For years, I had been covering their financial obligations. My mother had pretended to be ill to get out of looking after my daughter. She would not watch my child even for a single evening, but had no problem watching my sister's children. I was finished being exploited. The response was fast and intense. People in my family I hadn't talked to in ages reached out to back me up. Friends shared their own experiences with difficult family relationships. Some of my parents' neighbors even added their perspectives, sharing how they'd seen my mother gardening or shopping on days she'd claimed to be confined to her bed. Lisa got the worst of the fallout. Her carefully constructed persona of the struggling single mom collapsed beneath the scrutiny of questions about how she spent her money and the constant vacations she took. Then came the climax, a knock on my door just 3 days later. I peered through the small opening and saw Margaret and Frank standing on my doorstep, looking like they needed help. My dad looked weary. My mom's eyes were bloodshot, and I wasn't certain if the tears were sincere or just for show. I paused, my hand resting on the door. A part of me wanted to just leave them there, hoping they'd eventually give up and go away. However, another part of me, the part that still held on somewhat, wished to know what they wanted. So I opened the door, remaining in the opening to prevent them from coming in. My mom spoke right away. Her voice cracked as she begged for us to speak, telling me they were my parents. I responded by telling them to just talk, staying where I was. My dad cleared his throat and said, "Son, your mother is heartbroken, we both are. We never intended to cause you pain. You didn't plan for me to learn the truth," I pointed out. "There's a distinction." My mom reached for my arm, but I moved away. "Honey, I know you're angry, but doing this, cutting us off, it's unkind. We can't pay our rent this month. The electricity company is about to disconnect our power. Is that what you desire, your parents living in the dark?" The guilt trip was so easy to see through, so obvious that I almost chuckled. "You have choices," I stated quietly. "Dad could get a job, you could move into a cheaper place. Lisa could start helping out finally, or you can keep this up and find out where it leads." My mom's face became stern. "After all the things we've done for you, is this your thanks? Kicking us out, are you? What exactly have you ever done for me, Mother? Mention a single thing in the last 10 years that wasn't about what I could do to help you." There was no response. Dad avoided eye contact. My mom's lips moved, forming words that never materialized. "That's what I was thinking," I told them. Since they made this decision, they should just deal with the consequences. I slammed the door. I was truly unburdened for the first time in my life. No more feelings of obligation. No more emotional games. No more constantly trying to find affection that wasn't genuine. And it felt wonderful. The next few weeks were remarkably calm. Aaron and I took Mia to the beach for a long, relaxing weekend. We started looking at homes in a different school system, a plan we'd discussed for years but had never actually followed through on. I got a raise at work, partially because I was now able to concentrate, without constantly being pulled away by family crises. But naturally, things can't be that simple. The whispers eventually got back to me, courtesy of concerned colleagues and relatives who lived far away. My parents were starting rumors that I was going through some kind of mental collapse. Lisa was telling anyone who would listen that I'd always been erratic and solely concerned with finances. My aunt gave me a call one night. She dispensed with the small talk, quickly informing me that they were saying I'd gone off the deep end. Margaret was letting everyone know I was experiencing a midlife crisis. I let out a breath, sinking back in my desk chair. I wondered if she was shocked by the news. She confessed she wasn't even a little bit. She'd known my mom, and she was aware that she hated giving up control of things. My aunt had always seen through my mom's tactics. That's the reason why they barely ever talked to each other. I asked how bad the situation was. She said it was pretty terrible. Apparently, they were getting kicked out of their place next month. Frank had attempted to get his old job back at the hardware store, but they weren't interested. Lisa had been hitting everyone up for money, but people were beginning to figure out what was going on. A little pang of something, it wasn't quite guilt, but it was close, hit me. I said to her that it didn't fall on me to fix it, but I didn't really believe it. My aunt went silent for a few seconds. She conceded that it wasn't my responsibility, and she also acknowledged I'd done more than enough to help them out. She just thought I should have this information. After we ended the call, I sat quietly, looking out at the sunset through my office window. Was I a terrible son? Was I a bad person? The insecurities started creeping in like the shadows as darkness fell. Erin found me there an hour later, still gazing off into the distance. She questioned if I was all right, sitting down on the edge of my desk. I told her I didn't know. Part of me felt liberated, but another part of me felt like I had done something wrong. She held my hand, her face was serious. She reminded me that I'd been financially supporting them for years. I'd given them more opportunities than they deserved. All I ever wanted was for them to be honest with me and show me the same respect they gave Lisa. It was impossible for them, utterly impossible. I knew she was right. She'd hit the nail on the head. I admitted I was concerned about their future, about the potential for problems when they became old and were truly unable to manage on their own. Erin gave my hand a firm squeeze. She said we'd deal with that hurdle when we came to it, but helping them didn't have to mean allowing them to control us. There was a world of difference between assisting my parents and becoming their constant source of money. I agreed, pulling her onto my lap. I jokingly inquired when she had gotten so smart. She stated that she'd always possessed wisdom. I was merely beginning to pay attention. 2 months went by. Mia mastered counting to 20, a milestone that gave me more satisfaction than any professional achievement ever did. We put in an offer on a home situated in a peaceful area with excellent schools. Life continued. Then the Christmas card arrived. It showed up on a Tuesday, mixed in with my bills and the supermarket circulars. There wasn't a return address, but I immediately knew my mother's handwriting. Inside was a standard holiday greeting card containing a family picture, showing my parents and Lisa with her children, all appearing happy as if nothing had happened. On the back, a solitary sentence in my mother's distinctive handwriting. "We miss you." No expression of regret, no recognition of the past events, just 3 words that were designed to fix everything. Without a second thought, I threw it in the garbage. That night, as Erin and I were decorating our Christmas tree, the doorbell sounded. I stopped dead, a strand of tinsel in my hand. Erin offered to answer it, pressing my shoulder gently as she walked away. I heard hushed talking, and then Erin reappeared with a face I couldn't decipher. "It's your dad," she whispered. "Just him." My father was standing in the doorway, hands shoved in his pockets, looking smaller than I recalled. His hair was completely gray now, since the last time I saw him, and there were deep wrinkles marking his face. We gave each other curt greetings. I questioned him about why he was here. He looked at Erin briefly, then back at me. He asked if we could chat for just a short time. Erin gave me a look that made it clear it was my decision. I agreed, and she took Mia upstairs to give her a bath, leaving us by ourselves. I motioned towards the living room, and we both sat on opposite ends of the couch, the partially decorated Christmas tree sparkling between us. "Your mother doesn't know I'm here," he started, staring at his hands. If she found out about this, she'd be livid, and that got my attention. "So, why are you here?" He took a deep breath. "Because I need to apologize to you, for real, not with any of the manipulative stuff your mother tries." I didn't say anything. I'd been on the receiving end of too many fake apologies throughout the years. He continued, his voice sounding raspy. He'd let me down not just lately, but for my entire life. He had just stood by when my mother showed favoritism to Lisa. He watched as she exploited my kindness without speaking up. He let it continue. The sheer, unvarnished truth in his voice took me by surprise. I asked him why he'd never intervened. He rubbed his face and suddenly appeared every bit his 68 years. I admitted that I was a person who backed down. It was less stressful to simply give in to her desires rather than argue, easier to remain silent rather than defend what I believed was right. I figured I wasn't entitled to any pardon. Frankly, if I were in his position, I wouldn't be. However, I needed him to comprehend that my decision to leave was the correct one, and he felt pleased with me for displaying a bravery that he'd never possessed. A constriction in my heart released a bit. I questioned him about the immediate future. They were going to live with Lisa, he informed me, making a face. It was my mother's notion, not his. Ironically, Lisa was not thrilled about it either. It turned out she didn't actually want to be their caretaker. Can you believe it? Despite everything, I felt a tiny grin start to form on my face. Amazing, I said in a dry tone. For the first time in ages, my father cracked a smile too. It was a sorrowful, weary smile, yet authentic. He mentioned he ought to depart. My mother would be wondering about his whereabouts. I accompanied him to the doorway, unsure of what to say. He hesitated at the entrance, turning back. "Merry Christmas, son." "That's a wonderful little girl you have," he added. "You're a superior dad compared to what I was." Before I could reply, he vanished, walking slowly through the light snow toward his vehicle. I shut the door, leaning against it, feeling strangely moved. I hadn't anticipated him admitting to his shortcomings, not to mention apologizing for them. It didn't change the past, but it was significant. Erin discovered me still standing there a few moments later. She inquired if I was all right. "Yes," I answered, shocking myself by truly feeling it. That night, after we got done putting up the Christmas tree, my mind drifted to the subject of family. I wasn't thinking about my biological family, though. Instead, I was contemplating the family I had created for myself. Erin, who accepted me completely, no strings attached, was one of them. Then there was Mia, who seemed to think I was the greatest thing in the world. And even my buddies and colleagues, the people who'd supported me through thick and thin, were part of it. They comprised my actual family, not ideal by any means, but authentic. We got settled into our new place, a small, four-bedroom house with a decent-sized backyard that could easily accommodate a swing set. Mia hit the milestone of turning 3, and she had a dinosaur-themed birthday party where our kitchen was coated in green frosting for ages. I would get a call from my dad every now and then, these short, uncomfortable phone calls that neither of us quite knew how to handle. My mom still wouldn't say she was sorry, and she'd go around telling whoever would listen that I was the one who should be saying I was sorry. Lisa, apparently, had given them the boot after just a couple months, because she couldn't deal with their unending requests. Now they were renting a small place and living off a set amount of money. Part of me was experiencing a sense of satisfaction. They were finally experiencing the ramifications of how they had behaved. Yet another part of me felt a sense of sadness, not exactly for them, but for what might have existed. I was grieving the connections we potentially could have had if only things had gone another way. One nice Saturday, as I was swinging Mia on her new swing, my phone lit up with a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was Lisa. "Can we talk?" I looked at the screen, not sure what to say. My sister and I hadn't said a word to one another ever since the whole thing happened at our parents' place. I wondered what she might want now, honestly. My curiosity got the better of me, though. I asked her when and where to meet. We decided to meet at a coffee shop the next Monday during my lunch hour. When I got there, Lisa was already waiting, and she looked different from how I remembered. She seemed less put together, more genuine somehow. She expressed her gratitude for my being there. I just went ahead and asked her straight up what she needed. She held her coffee mug tightly, not meeting my gaze. She confessed that she owed me an apology. She had treated me terribly. I just raised an eyebrow, expecting more. She told me that she thought things would be okay when our parents moved in with her. She expected they'd assist with the children, maybe even contribute financially, but they just expected to be taken care of. Mom criticized her cooking, her parenting, and the way she kept the house. Dad just spent all his time in front of the television. "Sounds about right," I responded with barely concealed sarcasm. She gave a little nod, appearing ashamed. She was, for the first time, grasping what I'd been experiencing all along. It was completely draining. After only 2 months, she couldn't cope with it anymore. I pointed out that she'd eventually made them leave. She had no choice, she stressed. They were making her absolutely miserable. I sat back, carefully observing my sister. There was a new quality in her features, a level of humility I had never seen from her before. I asked her why she was sharing all of this with me. She took a deep breath and finally made eye contact. She conceded that I had been right all along about everything. Mom did show favoritism toward her. She had indeed taken advantage. She let me shoulder all the blame on my own because it was easier for her than confessing how awful everything was, and I knew she truly regretted it. I had no idea what to anticipate from this conversation, and this certainly wasn't it. In all the years I'd known her, Lisa had never offered a single apology. I responded by saying I was thankful for it, although one apology didn't make up for all the years of her actions. She immediately concurred. She wasn't angling for absolution. She simply wanted me to know that she understood now what they had done to me, what she herself had done. She was attempting to be a better person for her children. I had to admit, something in her words really resonated with me. For my kids, she had said, regardless of all that had happened, Lisa was a mother striving to stop the cycle. I then inquired if she still kept in contact with her kids. Occasionally, she answered, Mom would still be Mom and she would never alter that fact. But Lisa was drawing lines now. No more constant babysitting. No more financial assistance. No more emotional manipulation. I gave her a nod, completely understanding exactly what she was saying. I, for my part, then inquired about her children, which was surprising even to me. A smile spread across Lisa's face, and I could see some of her stress fading. They were doing well, she shared with me. They were busy. Jack was now in kindergarten. Emma was completely consumed with soccer. They sometimes inquired about their cousin Mia. There was an uncomfortable stillness that settled between us. 3 decades of a tangled past wasn't going to vanish in a single meeting over coffee. Eventually, I informed her I couldn't guarantee we would ever be close. There was simply too much that had happened, but perhaps we could begin again, as adults, with no of the old difficulties. Lisa nodded, with eyes that looked close to tearing up. She seemed pleased, she whispered. We chatted for about 20 more minutes, being cautious and avoiding anything controversial. We covered her career, my new place, and even the current weather. It might not have been a whole lot, but it was a start. As we were preparing to leave, she turned towards me. She thanked me once more for agreeing to meet with her and for standing up to them. If I hadn't, she wasn't certain she ever would have learned the facts of the matter. I gave a slight nod, not quite ready to say, "You're welcome," though I understood what she meant. Heading back towards my office, I felt a certain ease. Not because everything was now fine, it wasn't, and very well might never be, but because I had finally broken free from the habits that had shaped my entire existence for such a long time. I wasn't the family's personal cash machine anymore. I was no longer the ignored son, the dependable one who was never given the credit he deserved. I was only Jake, husband, father, and a guy who, at last, was getting to live life the way he wanted. That evening, as I was putting Mia to bed, she looked up at me with her mother's gaze. "Daddy," she murmured, starting to drift off, "are you happy?" I gave her a kiss on her forehead, inhaling the sweet aroma of her shampoo. "Yes, my sweet girl," I said. "I am really happy," and for the first time in ages, it was entirely true.